Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is FITYA AWALIA MAFAZA, and now I will explain about a methodical history of language teaching. The first, approach, method, and technique. What is method? About 4 decades ago, Edward Anthony gave us a definition that has admirably withstood the rest of time. His concept of method was the second of 3 hierarchical elements, namely, approach, a set of assumptions dealing with the nature of language learning and teaching. Method was described as an overall plan for systematic presentation of language based upon a selected approach. And technique is where the specific activities manifested in the classroom that were consistent with the method and therefore were in harmony with an approach as well. And method was an umbrella term for the specification and interrelation of theory and practice. And a couple of decades later, Jack Richard and Theodore Rogers proposed a reformulation of the concept of method, where named approach defines assumptions, beliefs, and theories about the nature of language and language learning. And design specify the relationship of those theories to classroom materials and activities. Procedure, techniques, and practice that are derived from one's approach and design. And changing winds and shifting sands. Albert McWhorter saw this changing winds and shifting sands, a cyclical pattern in which a new method emerged about every quarter of a century. Each new method broke from the old but took with it some of the positive aspects of the previous practices. And next, the grammar translation method. In the 19th century, the classical method came to be known as the grammar translation method. There was little to distinguish grammar translation from what had gone on in foreign language classrooms for centuries beyond a focus on grammatical rules as the basis for translating from the second to the native language. Prader and Sales-Murcia listed the major characteristics of grammar translations. 1. Classes are taught in the mother tongue with little active use of the target language. 2. Much vocabulary is taught in the form of lists of isolated words. 3. Long elaborate explanations of the intricacies of grammar are given. 4. Grammar provides the rules for putting words together, and instruction often focuses on the form and inflection of words. And 5. Reading of difficult classical texts began early. 6. Little attention is paid to the content of texts, which are treated as exercises in grammatical analysis. 7. Often the drills are exercises in translating disconnected sentences from the target language into the mother tongue. And last, little or no attention is given to pronunciation. Disadvantages: it does not virtually enhance a student's communicative ability in the language. Many standardized tests of foreign language still do not attempt to tap into communicative abilities, so students have little motivation to go beyond grammar analysis, translations, and rote exercises. And next, Goin and the series method. Francis Goin was a French teacher of Latin with remarkable insights. He had gone through a very painful set of experiences. Goin tried to memorize a German grammar book and a list of 248 irregular German verbs. But when he went to test his new knowledge, he couldn't remember a single word. Goin observed his 3-year-old nephew and came up with the following insights. Language learning is primarily a matter of transforming perceptions into conceptions. Children use language to represent their conceptions. Language is a means of thinking, of representing the world to oneself. Series method, a method that taught learners directly without translation and conceptually without grammatical rules and explanations. A series of connected sentences that are easy to perceive. Emphasized presenting each item in context and using gestures to supplement verbal meaning. Taught learners directly a series of connected sentences. Examples: I walk towards the door. I draw nearer to the door. I draw nearer to the door. I get to the door. I stop at the door. I stretch out my arm. I take hold of the handle. I turn the handle. I open the door. I pull the door. The door moves. The door turns on its hinges. The door turns and turns. I open the door wide. I let go of the handle. The direct method. The second language learning is similar to the first language. Lots of oral interaction, spontaneous use of language, no translation, and little or no analysis of grammatical rules. Richard and Rogers summarize the principle of the direct method. 1. Classroom instruction was conducted in the target language. 2. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences was taught. 3. Communication skills were organized around question-answer exchange between teachers and students. 4. Grammar were taught in-depthly. 5. New teaching points were taught through modeling and practice. 6. Concrete vocabulary was taught through pictures and objects. And 7. Abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. 8. Speech and listening comprehension were taught. And last, correct pronunciation and grammar were emphasized. Disadvantages. The direct method did not take well in public education, where the constraints of budget, classroom size, time, and teacher background made such a method difficult to use. With theoretical foundations, its success depended on teacher skill and personality more than on the methodology itself. And the next, the audiolingual method. The characteristics of audiolingual method may be summed up in the following list. 1. New material is presented in dialogue form. 2. There is dependence of memorization of set phrases and overlearning. 3. Structures are sequenced by means of contrastive analysis and taught one at a time. 4. Structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. 5. There is little or no grammatical explanation. Grammar is taught by inductive analogy rather than by deductive explanation. 6. Vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. 7. There is much use of tapes, language labs, and visual aids. 8. Great importance is attached to pronunciation. 9. Very little use of the mother tongue by teachers is permitted. 10. Successful responses are immediately reinforced. 11. There is a great effort to get students to produce error-free utterance. And last, there is a tendency to manipulate language and disregard content. Disadvantages: it failure to teach long-term communicative proficiency. Language was not really acquired through a process of habit formation and overlearning. That errors were not necessarily to be avoided at all costs, and that structural linguistics did not tell us everything about language that we needed to know. And next, cognitive code learning. Consequent revolution in linguistics turned linguists and language teachers toward the deep structure of language, requiring that children subconsciously acquire a system of rules. Proponents of cognitive code learning subconsciously began to inject more deductive rule learning into language classes. Cognitive code learning was not so much a method as it was an approach that emphasized a conscious awareness of rules and their applications to second language learning. And the next, designer method of the spirited 70s. Community language learning. Charles Curran created a classic example of an effectively based method, what he called the counseling learning. The social dynamics of such a group were of primary importance. Curran's counseling learning model of education was extended to language learning contexts in the form of community language learning, or CLL. Methodology: the group of clients or students, having first established in their native language and interpersonal relationship and trust, were seated in a circle with the counselor or teacher on the outside of the circle. Advantages and disadvantages. Effective advantages: the counselor allows the learner to determine the type of conversation and to analyze the foreign language inductively. The counselor teacher could become non-directive. Translation is a complex process, is often easier said than done. Suggestopedia, a method that was derived from Bulgarian psychologist Georgy Lozanov. He believed that the human brain could process great quantities of material if given the right condition for learning, which are a state of relaxation and giving over of control to the teacher. In applications of Suggestopedia to foreign language learning, Lozanov and his followers experimented with the presentation of vocabulary, readings, dialogues, role-plays, drama, and a variety of other typical classroom activities. Disadvantages: the right conditions may not be available wherever this method was taught. like the using of music and comfortable chairs. It replaced the understanding process in language learning by memorization techniques. The Silent Way by Caleb Getachew. The Silent Way was characterized by a problem-solving approach to learning. Richards and Rogers summarized the theory of learning behind the silent way. Learning is facilitated if the learner discovers or creates rather than remembers and repeats what is to be learned. Learning is a accompanying mediating cycle of checks. Learning is facilitated by problem solving involving the material to be learned. Disadvantages: the silent way was too harsh a method and the teacher was too distant, or they had to get out of my way, while students work out solutions. To encourage a communicative atmosphere, avoidance and overt correction than it permitted. There aren't any specialness in this method by using the rods and charts. It can look like any other language classroom. Total cycle response, developed by James Asher. The instructor is the director of a stage play in which the students are the actors. Students did a deal of listening and acting. The teacher was very directive in orchestrating a performance. Imperative mode was analyzed to teach even in the more advanced levels, introduced by humor to make the atmosphere comfortable enough for the learning process. Disadvantages: effective in the beginning levels of language proficiency, but lost its distinctiveness as learners advance in their competence. In reading and writing activities, students were limited to spinning off the oral work in the classroom. Soon the learners' needs for spontaneity and unrehearsed language must be met, not only the threat actions. The natural approach. Stephen Carson. The natural approach was made at the goal of basic personal communication skills, that is, everyday language situations, conversations, shopping, listening to the radio, and the like. The initial task of the teacher was to provide comprehensible input, that is, spoken language that is understandable to the learner, or just a little beyond the learner's level. Learners need not say anything during this silent period until they feel ready to do so. The teacher was the source of the learner's input and the creator of an interesting and stimulating variety of classroom activities, comments, games, skits, and small group work. 3 stages of the natural approach. A. The pre-production stage is the development of listening comprehension skills. B. The early production stage is usually marked with errors as the student struggles with the language. C. The last stage is one of extending production into longer stretches of discourse involving more complex games, role plays, open-ended dialogues, discussions, and extended small group work. Disadvantages: the heavy emphasis on comprehensible input in the silent period. What about the student whose speech never emerged? And with all students on different timetable for this so-called emergence, how does the teacher manage a classroom efficiently? How does structures the learners are to be provided with? And the next, Bayern method, national functional syllabuses. Begin with the work of Council of Europe and its use in UK in 1970. Attention to functions as the organizing elements of English language curriculum, grammatical structures serve as the organizers. With focus on the pragmatic purposes to which we put the language. It wasn't a method, but it was close to what they called an approach. The NVS quickly provided popular underpinnings for the development of communicative textbooks and materials in English language courses. The functional basis of language programs has continued to the present day. In round, for example, the following functions are covered in the first several lessons of an advanced beginner textbook. 1. Introducing self and other people. 2. Exchanging personal information. 3. Asking how to spell someone's name. 4. Giving commands. 5. Apologizing and thanking. 6. Identifying and describing people. 7. Or less, asking for information. I think that's all for me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.